Hey, Life Unchained group. So thank you very much for checking out this live stream presentation. I'm really excited to begin this new series in the Life Unchained group of interviewing and just having conversations with experts in the industry, experts in the field. There's a lot of people that are involved in some regards with addiction recovery, with helping people, being advocates, being allies, and just getting involved to help people that have struggled with, or families that have struggled with addiction in the past, just help them get to that better place, get to the tools, get to the resources, and get to that experience in recovery that they really want and they really deserve. So I'm really excited to kick this series off with my first guest, Michael Lewis. He's got a unique background and a unique service that he provides to the industry, which I'm really excited to have this conversation and to start it. So without further ado, Michael Lewis, thank you for joining me.
Oh, Garrett, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be a part of your initial launch, and anything we can do to help people going through the trials and tribulations of addiction and recovery, it's my pleasure to be a part of.
Well, I really appreciate it. So for people that are checking this out, let's see, quickly or anytime, I'm also using this as an opportunity to experiment with some different technology and different platforms. So I want to see if this works. Okay, here we go. Here's a preview of Michael's website, and also in the description, I've put his LinkedIn profile. I'll provide that again at the end, or remind you again at the end, in case you'd like to connect with him. I'm sure you're going to hear some things that you like today, and you might want to reach out and connect with him in the future. So if we could, let's just kind of start with the basics. So what is it that you do in the addiction or the addiction recovery community?
Great place to start. So I work with families battling addiction, prepare for the long road ahead, and make smart financial decisions along the way. It is my experience, and my wife and I have a story to share. We have a son who is in recovery. He is now 4 years sober, thankfully, but he also spent 13 years getting to that point. And at the time, we were dealing with all the emotional struggles that you can imagine. You have a young man who basically has lost his way, turned to drugs, became very distraught, very depressed. In turn, made us very distraught and very depressed. But we had no idea what we were getting into. We had no idea our way forward. And as parents, we just felt like we had to do whatever it took, and we would write a check to no matter who it was, as long as they promised to, return our child to us and we can get our life back to normal. Over the course of this journey, we learned a lot, one of which was once you're on this journey, you don't ever come back to the way it was. It is a new way forward. And two, the financial implications of recovery. And I don't just mean the costs to me. There are so many hidden costs in dealing with recovery. And it's the direct cost of rehab. It's the cost of medications, because typically someone who's going through this journey has potentially some mental issues that need to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. As a couple, we were going through some trials and tribulations, so we needed some counseling as well. You have transportation costs, you have the cost of relapse, you have the cost of enabling your loved one. I can tell you countless stories of how our child was able to talk to us, manipulate us, and we continue to feed into the habit. And it took my daughter to basically remind me that I had a family and I had obligations to the entire family, and that if I wasn't going to pay attention, that there was a good chance that not only would we potentially lose our son, but I might lose my wife and my daughter due to the fact that we were so immersed in the problem at hand that we couldn't possibly comprehend and make proper decisions as it relates to making sound financial decisions, holding people that we were entrusting with our son's life and treatment and care, and it became basically a downward spiral. And so my hope is that by working with families, they can learn from the mistakes that we've made. I am happy to say that we're in a really good place now. Our son is doing very well, but it was a long road, and it continues to be a road. So my objective is to deal with the family. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. It is a family issue, not just an individual issue, but it is a family issue that has many different flavors. In our case, we were dealing with the teenagers. Other families are dealing with maybe a loved one, a spouse. And each one has different considerations that need to be taken into mind when you're planning and making these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. And as we're trying to deal with something that's, in the present moment, and we're trying to find solutions and trying to find how to literally save somebody's life in the present moment, we have to make those decisions in the context of how it will play forward and what implications or how it will adjust things in the future. So you coming at it with your background in the financial industry, financial services industry, it must have been a unique journey getting into it and navigating your way through it and beyond it. But what a great opportunity you found to kind of come back and take that knowledge and help people from that regard, from that respect, because there are different things that are, not just financial resources that are out there, but different planning considerations. And I think one of the scariest things for everybody involved, especially families and loved ones going into this or dealing with this journey, is the number of unknowns. I mean, there's so many unknowns in it. And if you haven't gone through it before, then of course you're not going to know everything that might come up or all the different considerations. So that's wonderful to have somebody that can talk from that aspect or that element of it. I think there's a lot of other resources out there for many other elements of helping somebody through that recovery journey. But I think this is one that's often either neglected or just not addressed as fully as it can be. So with that in mind, so what's some of the basic advice or what's some of the starting advice that you have for people that you come in contact with or you're working with?
Well, that's a great question. And the advice I tend to give, clients as I meet them is one, this is a long road ahead. I mean, I can't emphasize that long enough. When you think about the entire cycle that someone goes through, and you desperately want to believe, and I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but that if you just pay the right person, everything's going to be okay. It doesn't work that way. You go from identifying that you have a problem to potentially having an intervention, then detox, then you go into inpatient care, then you go into IOP facility, then you're transitioning from getting sober to integrating back into society, and then you're moving forward. And one of the challenges that I found in dealing with both the families and the loved one who's in recovery is there's almost this dichotomy. When you're going in through recovery, they very much stress this notion of one day at a time. Just do what you can one day at a time, which for getting sober is completely crucial. And I completely understand it. But when you're starting to think about finances, I mean, the important thing about finances is one day at a time does not work. When it comes to finances, time is actually an ally of yours. But the reason that I have found that most families and those in recovery struggle with finances is because they're no longer to think long term. They feel that right now, if they can just get through the day and survive, that's a win. And so anytime they're in a position where they have a little bit of money, they figure today is my day. I need to get through it. And there's nothing on the other side that counteracts that need for immediacy. I have found, and this is true with not only the families of the individuals, I teach this for all my clients, is that the power of dreaming and the power of having and being able to visualize the future is an incredible motivator.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I said certainly, whether it's motivation away from the fear of the outcome of the future or a draw toward something that's positive in the future. And I'm sure that one of the challenges that you face or help people overcome, a challenge that everybody faces, just the nature of addiction, is that there are so many unknowns and there's so many different pathways either into active addiction or beyond active addiction. You mentioned some of the many resources, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, self-help groups, different sorts of services, different sorts of professional services. And every person that's on that journey, every family that's on that journey, it's going to require a unique combination of those things. Some people might be a series of inpatient long-term treatment facilities and a series of relapses after that. Other people might be, they never do a long-term inpatient. They find some resources outpatient. Some go a completely different means that we're not that we haven't mentioned. But all of that, just as life is in general and financial planning is in general, there's so many different variables and everybody's life could take a different path. So today, the decisions and the plans that you put in place today need to take into account so many potential variables or outcomes in the future. Real quickly before I forget, so if anybody's watching this live, please, you can drop your comments in the comment section. If you're catching a replay and you have some questions or comments that you'd like to add to the conversation, then you can please do so in the comment section. You can tag Michael directly if you want him to respond, or I'll be happy to forward anything on. You can also check out his website at any time and connect with him personally or privately through the website and through his LinkedIn account, which is posted in the description. So now back to my train of thought. So many different variables, so many different options or opportunities, and everybody's focus, as you mentioned, is kind of being on surviving this moment, which really that's at the root of addiction, whether it's the family that's trying to deal with the struggle or whether it's the individual that's struggling with that addictive substance or behavior. It's all about trying to survive this moment. So what's the best advice for surviving this moment and getting the tools and resources and paying the expenses that are needed today with that vision for the long term, the success in the long term?
So you make a couple of really good points, and I'm going to go back to my wife's and I's particular situation. One is in the immediacy of the moment, we had no long-term plan. So we had no idea where we were going and how we were going to get there. So we were basically a rudderless boat in a very strong current, just being taken down a whitewater raft, for which we were completely unprepared for. What a plan does, it gets you grounded. It makes you understand that there is a rhyme and a reason and a direction. And for us, that was profoundly impactful because it took us from feeling completely hopeless and lost to more of a purpose. It allowed you to not only focus on the short-term needs that you have, but it also had a longer-term goal and aspirations that you were shooting for. And all of a sudden you realize that if you pushed and used all your finances to deal with just the short-term ahead, you realize that you were going to come up short later on. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it starts making you more aware of the choices you've made, and it starts getting you more involved in holding other people accountable. And I don't just mean the facilities. The interesting thing about recovery is, as much as you want it to happen on behalf of the loved one, and you feel that if you spend the money and maybe you push hard enough, that loved one is ultimately going to do the work required in order to receive the benefits of treatment. The fact is, if he's not ready, it's not going to happen. And that was a hard lesson for us to learn. We realized at some point as parents, as much as we wanted him to be well, as much as we wanted him to be happy, we couldn't do it for him. And when you get to the point that you recognize that someone once told me, if you care more about your loved one's recovery than they do, you're on the wrong path. The person in recovery has to own the recovery. Certainly. And oddly enough, that transition point for us actually pivoted on issues of finance. Now, one of the things that we did with our son, and I'm as guilty as anyone in this for it, was he was able to manipulate me. He was able to, extract money from me, and I enabled his behavior. Mm-hmm. And what I learned over time was how destructive that was, and how I was really inhibiting his ability to take responsibility for his recovery. Mm-hmm. And we were out for dinner one night, and I was with a friend, and we were having a beautiful dinner. Everything was lovely. My son looked very energized. He looked like he was doing very well. And at the end of dinner, he said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And he said, "Sure." And we went outside, and he goes, I need to borrow $50. I go, "What for?" He goes, "Well, I don't get paid for another 2 weeks. My rent is due. I need gas in the car. I don't really have any food in the refrigerator. And if you could just give me $50, I think I can make it till the next paycheck." And at that point, I looked him in the eye and I said, "Listen, if $50 is the only thing that's between you and successful, navigating the next couple of weeks, you're a smart kid. You can figure it out. But as far as us lending you money, the Bank of Lewis is closed." And he stormed out, and he looked at me with such combination of disbelief and anger and hatred, and he stormed off. And I literally did not hear from him for 3 days. And I can tell you that was the longest 3 days of my life.
I'm sure.
But the third day he called, and he said, "Listen, Dad, I know that was a tough decision for you. I just want you to know that that was the right decision. I have to take responsibility for this, and I'm going to." And from that point onward, what I found was we stopped looking backwards and trying to figure out how we got to where we were, but we started looking forwards and saying, all right, what do we do from here? Yeah. And maybe that's the most important thing that I think came out of this is when we were arguing, and we argued a lot, and we argued over some very minor things. And I started to realize that for the most part, what I was really mad about wasn't that he was in recovery or that he was, addiction, or even that if he was failing. What I was angry about was what it was doing to the rest of my family, and he didn't know about it. And I found that I probably didn't give him enough credit. I was so nervous that he was so frail, so fragile, that if I shared with him what I was going through as a parent, that it would just put too much on his shoulders and force him back down the road of relapse. Yeah. But what instead I learned was that by sharing with him what it was doing to all of us made him more keenly aware of the importance of whatever help he was going to get going forward. He had to make the most of whatever we were willing to give him. Yeah, wow. And that was, again, hugely impactful. I mean, today, our son is working 2 jobs. He's been very happy. He's very grounded. He's gotten a lot more philosophical in nature. He's gotten a lot more even-tempered. We have deeper discussions about things that are concerning him. And while I'm not going to say that it all came from discussion of finance, I will tell you that getting that discussion out there and having these discussions and sharing with him what it was doing to the family, that it became not just about him, but it became about us, was transformational.
That's great. Yeah. And I mean, it is so however it comes, but so important in that recovery journey. So I'm glad to see that you were able to recognize and kind of make that shift. Whether intentional or just coincidental to your willingness to make that tough decision in the moment, but it puts you on that place where that family unit could come back together, and it looks like that might have helped your son navigate the path that he did. Backing up a moment, you mentioned you mentioned, let's see, oh, knowing when that family member is ready to get support, because I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it. A lot of money is wasted, a lot of time, energy, and money is wasted in trying to force people or getting people to go into or seek treatment when they're not ready for it. And as is commonly known, if the person's not ready for it, nothing's really going to help. Now, how you can help them get to that place where they're ready, I mean, there's different approaches or different philosophies about that, but ultimately it has to be their decision, has to be what they're trying to do. So what advice do you have for family members that have a loved one who's struggling, but it's evident that that person's not ready to seek or get the help?
This is going to sound hard and maybe callous, but the fact is, if someone is not ready, you have to be, in my opinion, prepared to let him go and let him find his own way. And wherever it takes him and as low as it takes him, then that's the journey he has to take. We did not do that initially. We were certainly behind him, but we sheltered him. We made it easy for him not to take on recovery because he had a safety net, as it were. He had a bed to live in. He had, a roof over his head. He had food in his belly. And with him and with us as a family, at some point, and it's very difficult. I mean, you think you're turning your back on him, but really, and I go back to the other story when he looked at me, when I basically said no, when I thought I was, basically sending him away forever. What he learned from this also is he saw a strength that maybe we didn't have at the time. A lot of kids, they realize they're manipulating their parents, but what they really want is they want their parents to show some backbone. They want their parents to stand up for themselves. And so you're getting pushed and you're getting pulled, and you're getting torn between what you want to do. And in reality, what you really need to do is just recognize that I've done what I can. I brought you up. I've taught you everything that I can teach you, and now I have to put trust in you, and you put your trust in God that whatever happens from here on out. He's going to find this inner strength to do it, and you have to believe that. And I believe me, at the beginning, you barely can, continue to have faith in God as you watch what's going on here. But in the end, we had to come to grips with the reality of, whatever's going to happen, we're going to have to put faith that he's going to do the best he can. I still, I had my wife, I have my daughter, we have careers. Everything was put on hold during this process, and it was crippling our family. And in the scheme of things, when you try to put all of this in perspective, as much as I want to make sure that my son is well, I also want to make sure that my wife is well, and I want to make sure that my daughter is well. And I do nobody any good if I tap every resource I can to solve one problem and create three others in its place. For us, it worked out well. Clearly, at the time you do it, you really are praying that it works, and you have no idea if it will. But what I would tell parents or loved ones is, you have to put your faith in them, that you've taught them well. I had a conversation with one parent, and they felt hopeless. And I said, listen, the fact that they're in a program should be very encouraging. And while you don't think they learned anything now, I will tell you, when they come out the other side, it's going to be precisely because of the values that you taught them that you don't think they have right now is what's going to get them through. And you just have to be patient. You should never give up hope. You should never give up love, but you have to give up control. And that's very hard. You think because you're paying the bills and you're enabling him, that somehow that allows you to make decisions for him. It really doesn't. And I think the strength really comes from your ability to let go.
So yeah, is that strength that you tapped into in that story that you shared? Not provide them the money that evening. What else did you tap into, or was it just that the faith that you had done what you could in the time that you had, and those strengths, or that wisdom, or that courage was going to come to the surface when you stopped, enabling or pushing in the wrong direction?
So the story I didn't completely share, I alluded to it, is my daughter heard me have a conversation with our son, and at the end of it, she said, "Was that our Zach?" And I said, "Yes, it was." And she goes, "Well, he's a drug addict and a liar, right?" And I go, "Yeah, I do." She goes, "And you just bought him a car, didn't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I did." And she said, "Do I have to become an addict in order to get the same amount of attention that he's getting?" And I'm looking at you right now, and that's probably the same look that I had. It's like, okay, to me, that was a seminal moment. And it came from my daughter. That gave me the strength to say no. And from there on out, I recognized that, okay, I am not going to go down this rabbit hole anymore. My family deserves better. Yeah. And we didn't do this. And I will tell you from the outset, and I've talked with a lot of other families where the husband and wife split because of the friction, and it's your fault. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I know my wife and I did at the outset is we looked at each other and I said, I don't know where this is going, but and our son blamed my wife for everything. And I looked at her and I said, no matter what happens here, I just want you to know this is not your fault. You did not do this, and please don't hold yourself, responsible for it. And that strength carries us through even to this day. Yeah. And it carried us through some very tough times. But that's where the strength really comes from, is knowing that you're part of a family, and that this is not the all-consuming part of the family. It is a part of it, and as a family, you will deal with it. But as a family, you can't get all consumed by it. Mm-hmm. That's where I think ultimately the strength comes from, is recognizing that you're part of something larger.
Mm. No, that's great. Appreciate you for watching. You yourself, if somebody in your family, a loved one, is with addiction, and you want to learn more about how to navigate the financial consequences of seeking and getting help, please reach out to Michael Lewis. You can go to his website. It's Tutor Financial Services at tutorfinancial.com. You'll see a link to his LinkedIn profile in the description. But a lot of things to consider, a lot of great advice and wisdom that he has to share with anybody, with any family members that are kind of going through this journey. Know that you're not alone. Know that there's answers and tools and resources out there available to you. And if any of those are involving the financial aspects of it, the financial planning aspects of it, or how to navigate the financial challenges and obstacles, then certainly reach out to Michael. I appreciate his time, and I'll just leave you with one last question. What advice would you give to somebody, a family of any size that just found out or is coming to terms with the fact that one of their family members is really struggling with addiction? What advice do you have to that family at the onset?
At the onset, my advice to families is don't succumb to the stigma and not share what you're going through and try to deal with this on your own. There is just way too much information, too many resources, too many choices, too many options to try to just say, all right, we're going to roll up our sleeves and figure this out on our own. You are at that point, no position to make really sound choices at all. You're highly emotional, you're highly charged, you're highly agitated. Those are the worst times to deal with it. But going at it alone is just going to internalize all the pain, all the agony. I'm not saying that you need to get a billboard out there and tell the world. The other side of it, though, is you have family, you have friends. Don't be afraid to tell them what you're going through, and don't be afraid to seek help. And this is why I chose to do what I do. Addiction has its own stigma. Then couple that with potentially being in some kind of financial stress, which is another stigma, and no one wants to admit to that either. Failing to admit to either, never mind both, is just, it's more than most people can bear. And so my advice to anybody who suspects that they're having an issue is don't be afraid to talk about it, and don't be afraid to get help.
Yeah. Before, then not going to have the answer, but the answers are, especially with resources and Tutor Financial. So thank you very much for your time. I'm excited to have you being our inaugural guest on this episode, on this series. So thank you for that. And please, for anybody that's watching the live or the replay, be sure to reach out to Michael if you have any questions. Check out the resources that he has available. I appreciate it.
Darren, thank you again for the opportunity, and a pleasure to be a part of this inaugural program.
All right. I look forward to having you back in episode.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.
Love to. Cheers.